here, everyone, and thanks for being so prompt. This is the regularly scheduled Community Development Committee meeting of the Metropolitan Council. I'm the chair, Robert Lilligren. It's Monday, August 2nd. And just before calling the meeting to order, just remind folks and to acknowledge that COVID-19 is causing us to alter our usual procedures. The Metropolitan Council chair has determined it's not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person committee meeting in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, Met Council members will participate in this meeting by phone or other electronic means. And this Community Development Committee meeting will be conducted under Minnesota Statute, Section 13D, point 021, conducted by WebEx, and it's recorded. Members of the public will be able to monitor the meeting by going to the agenda online to view the live stream of this meeting at the Metropolitan Council website. The video is embedded directly in the agenda on the website. Just to remind members, please only use the chat function to address technical difficulties. We have to allow for council members, staff, and any guests to hear what's said. And so we will communicate with each other through speaking. And if there's no questions on that, I will call this meeting to order. And by taking attendance, Michelle will call the roll to ensure we have a quorum. So Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. And we did receive advance notice that council members Atlas Ingebrigtsen and Muse will not be able to participate today. And Chambers will be running just a little late.
Thank you.
So I will start with council member Cummings.
I am here.
Johnson.
Did you hear
Lee.
me?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Vento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And we are a quorum. Next item is our approval of our agenda. And if there's no comments or corrections, we can just view it as approved. Committee members, any changes? Hearing none, we have an agenda, and next on the next item is the approval of the minutes from the July 19th regular Community Development Committee meeting. And is there a motion to approve, please?
Wolf moves approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Lindstrom.
Great. And committee members, any discussion, corrections? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the minutes.
Yes, Chair Lilligren, excuse me. Let's see, it was Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And the minutes are approved. Committee members, next on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are 3 items considered routine and non-controversial. Includes Parks Legacy signature authorization, the City of Plymouth Hollydale Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and the City of Farmington's Rivers Edge Townhomes Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
Wolf
Mr.
moves
Chair.
approval.
Johnson
Thank you.
seconds.
Great, thank you, council members. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a brief comment.
Please, council member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have to say the City of Plymouth Hollydale Comprehensive Plan Amendment, I was involved in this for 20 years, and I believe this will be the final vote on this amendment. So it went through a lot of public process at the City of Plymouth, but it's kind of full circle for me, so I just wanted to say that. Nice to see it on consent.
Thanks for the comments, council member. Congratulations on seeing this work completed, for sticking with it. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. The consent agenda is adopted. We'll move on to our two non-consent business items for this evening. The first is 2021-199. It's the City of Minnetrista's Lindstrom Estate Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and Jake Riley is here to present. Welcome, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. So you have in front of you the City of Minnetrista's Lindstrom Estate Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And let's see here if I can follow along with my own. And the next slide, we see the community designation for the City of Minnetrista. And as shown in Figure 2 of your staff report, Thrive MSP 2040 gives the City of Minnetrista 3 community designations. Minnetrista is designated as agricultural, which is the darker green in the west, diversified rural, which is the lighter green, generally in the middle part of the city, and emerging suburban edge in light yellow, generally in the east and near St. Bonifacius. The area affected by the amendment is shown in red in the agricultural area of the city, sort of oddly adjacent by a corner to the diversified rural portion of the city. Residential densities in these areas are 1 housing unit per 40 acres. The amendment area is proposed to be redesignated from agricultural to diversified rural. On the next slide, you see the regional systems in relation to the amendment site, which is also in Figure 1 of your staff report. There's nothing really very close to the site in question. On the next slide, the next slide shows the details of this particular amendment. The amendment proposes to re-guide a 38-acre parcel located at the southeast corner of County Road 92 and West Highland Road from permanent agriculture to rural. The purpose of the re-guiding is to allow subdivision and development of not more than 3 residential properties. And the city also requests a change in the Thrive MSP 2040 community designation for this parcel from agricultural to diversified rural. And actually we asked them to make sure that it was okay with everybody, that it worked, because that way they can be consistent with policy. So on the next slide, you see the existing planned land use for 2040. That's prior to the amendment, and that's shown in Figure 3 of your staff report. It is permanent agriculture, which allows a maximum density of 1 unit per 40 acres. That's what's consistent with the agricultural community designation. On the next slide, you see the proposed post-amendment land use, which is in Figure 4 of your staff report. And the proposed guiding for the land uses rural. Rural land uses in the city allow 1 unit per 10 acres, which is consistent with the proposed community designation of diversified rural, which allows a maximum of 4 units per 40 acres, or 1 per 10. And with the proposed change to the community designation, the amendment will be consistent with regional land use policy. So on the next slide, you see the findings. That we find that the proposed amendment conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies with the proposed community designation change, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. The next slide has your proposed action that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. Authorize the City of Minnetrista to place its comprehensive plan amendment into effect, find that the amendment does not change the city's forecasts, and revise the Thrive MSP 2040 community designation for the subject parcel from agricultural to diversified rural as shown in Figure 3 in the review record. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley, for that report and for your work on this. And committee members, any questions or comments on that report? Yeah, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Oh, just a quick note, Mr. Chair, that although I wish I had a 38 acre estate, or I wish I had a relative that had a 30 acre estate, I don't, and I have no connection to these fine Lindstroms in the western burbs. So no conflict.
Thank you for that disclosure, Councilmember Lindstrom. Any further comments or questions on that report? Comments or questions? Seeing None, Mr. Riley proposes that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached review record and authorize the city of Minnetrista to place its comprehensive plan to effect. Find that the amendment does not change the city's forecasts and revise the Thrive MSP 2040 community designation for the subject parcel from agricultural to diversified rural as shown in figure 3 of the review record. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
Wolf moves approval.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Cummings seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the motion.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That item is adopted, and we'll move on to our second and final non-consent business item tonight, which is 2021-200. It's a City of Grant 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and Mr. Riley will stay with us to present. Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. As I neglected to mention earlier, I'm Jake Riley, the sector representative for portions of District 3 and all of Districts 11 and 12 in the local planning assistance group in the community development division. Unfortunately, the City of Grant's consultant was not able to join us today, but I would like to just sort of state for the record that it was great to work with their folks, and it's nice to have this plan in front of us or in front of you today. So before you today is the review of the City of Grant's 2040 Comprehensive Plan. On the next slide, the regional systems for the City of Grant are located in figure 1 of your staff report. And here we have regional trails, including the planned Lake Links Regional Trail and the Central Greenway Regional Trail Search Corridor. The plan also appropriately acknowledges some state recreation lands in the city, including the Gateway and Browns Creek State Trails. There's one principal arterial, Trunk Highway 36, in the southern part of the community. And the city is not on the regional wastewater system and is entirely provided wastewater service through the use of subsurface sewage treatment systems, or SSTS, or perhaps in less common or more common parlance, septic systems. The community designation is shown on the next slide. So for the City of Grant, this is a diversified rural community, and it is located in west central Washington County. The next slide shows the forecasted growth, which is table 1, also in your staff report. It shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts that the city will grow by 180 people, representing 190 households, and there will be an increase of 260 jobs in the city in the same time frame. The next slide shows the existing land use for the City of Grant. The city is only partially developed with 72% of land as agricultural or undeveloped. Approximately 18% of the city is residential, as illustrated here and in figure 3 of the staff report, and about 21% of the city includes land enrolled in the agricultural preserves program. The next slide shows the 2040 future land use expectations for the City of Grant. The plan identifies residential densities and policies that are consistent with the city that is designated as diversified rural. Guiding land uses include agricultural preserves, which is 1 unit per 40 acres, rural residential / agricultural, which are 4 units per 40 acres, and rural residential, which is 1 unit per 10 acres. All residential land uses in the city are required to be developed with a maximum density of 4 dwelling units per 40 acres or 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres. The city maintains the maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres through its official controls, including its zoning and subdivision ordinances. The maximum allowed density is in the rural residential land use district, which is consistent with the diversified rural land use policies. The city does not have a flexible development ordinance. So that brings us to the next slide, which are the findings. The findings that we find, the staff findings are that the proposed amendment conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. On the next slide, the proposed action today is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the City of Grant to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect and advise the city that when available to provide the council the date the Rice Creek Watershed District approved the local water management plan and the date the city adopted the final local water management plan. The next slide shows the meeting schedule, and that will show up at the Metropolitan Council full meeting on Wednesday, August 11th. Because as stated, there's no regional sewers provided here, so they don't need to go to the Environment Committee. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Councilmember.
Riley. Yep, thank you, Mr. Riley. Any questions or comments on that report? Questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Riley proposes that the Metropolitan Council adopt the advisory comments and review record and authorize the City of Grant to place its 2040 comprehensive plan to effect and advise the city when available to provide the council the date of the Rice Creek Watershed District approved the local water management plan and the date the city adopted the final local water management plan. Is there a motion to approve, please?
Vento moves approval.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Wolf seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the motion.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That item is adopted, and we'll move on to our final item on the agenda tonight, which is an information item that I think will probably generate some discussion, some good discussion. It's the Public Housing Agency Plan discussion, and I believe it's Ms. Paulson, Stephanie Paulson, that is here to present. Ms. Paulson, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, council members, and thank you, Chair Lilligren. My name is Stephanie Paulson. I'm the Assistant Director with Metro HRA. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Great. So I'm just here today to discuss some proposed changes with you to Metro HRA's required PHA plan. I'm going to start with some high-level kind of grounding information just about our PHA plan and then get into the changes. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, we are required by HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, to have this guiding document, this PHA plan. It serves as a guide and informs HUD and program participants and the public of Metro HRA's mission for serving the needs of low-income families across the region and different strategies that we're using to do that. Next slide, please. We, as the Metro HRA and all PHAs, are required to have a 5-year plan. The 5-year plan is submitted every 5th year. It is right now approved from 2020 to 2024, and it is a long-range guiding document to meet the needs of our region. Next slide, please. We are also required to complete an annual PHA plan. This is kind of our short-range document, right? 5-year, 1 year. We do this annually, and we communicate elements of the plan that have been updated or revised each year. Next slide, please. As a supplement to our PHA plan, a supporting document is the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. This is our primary policy document. It contains mandatory and some discretionary policies, and it is available for public review. Right now, it is available for public review. Next slide, please. So these next handful of slides are just going to be some highlights of changes that you'll see in this year's administrative plan. Some of them are really exciting targeted funding growth, targeted funding program growth opportunities, and others are just clarifying language, and others are updates recommended by industry leaders. So this includes general language and policy revisions, foster youth to independence and emergency housing vouchers, and then some clarifying language around our project-based voucher offer and award criteria. Some of this are, there's some red line language available right now in the administrative plan. And a lot of it is pertained to remote video inspections and remote briefings. This is recommended language that's been provided to us by industry leaders that just came out of HUD in response to COVID-19 and the global pandemic. So this HUD has allowed us some remote video inspections, and I know we've talked to you about that before, and some remote video briefings just in response to social distancing. Next slide, please. So the first new program that is included in this year's administrative plan is the Foster Youth to Independence. And I know you had heard an item previously in, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks ago about the Foster Youth to Independence. It's a targeted funding program. It's going to provide voucher assistance to youth with a current or prior history of child welfare involvement. So these referrals are going to come directly from the public child welfare agencies. Eligible youth will be between the ages of 18 to 24, and we are planning to partner with Hennepin, Carver, and Anoka counties in these initiatives. Next slide, please. The next really exciting new voucher program coming our way are the emergency housing vouchers. Metro HRA was allocated 218 emergency housing vouchers through the American Rescue Plan. These vouchers are targeted at families and households at risk of homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, or at high risk of housing instability. We are planning to accept referrals from the 3 local COCs, that is Hennepin, Ramsey, and SMAC. That's the Suburban Metro Area Continuum of Care. And we are allocating a little over 100 to Hennepin, around 50 to Ramsey, and around 50 to SMAC. We are taking into account the need of each continuum of care as well as access to other vouchers. So St. Paul was also allocated some vouchers, and so they'll serve Ramsey County, and Minneapolis Public Housing was awarded some emergency housing vouchers, and they will serve Hennepin County as well. We are required to accept referrals directly from the COCs, so we just executed an MOU with each COC. And the COCs will work with Metro HRA to determine a system for tracking referrals from families whose primary residence is the Metro HRA transit light rail system, bus station, or so we're going to work to come up with a tracking mechanism so we know how many of these families that the council has prioritized as a population are coming through that coordinated entry referral system. Next slide, please. The next handful of slides are going to dip into our project-based voucher offer and award criteria. Some grounding information for our PBVs. PBVs come through a very limited pool of turnover vouchers from their standard housing choice voucher program, and HUD allows PHAs to project base up to 20% of vouchers. You were recently, our director Terry Smith recently shared with you that about 750 vouchers turn over each year. Of those 750 vouchers, we serve our waitlist applicants, PBV unit movers, so families who are currently living in a project-based voucher unit who want to leave the project-based voucher into tenant-based assistance, initial project-based voucher vacancies, so brand new developments or brand new projects, those vouchers, special purpose vouchers, and then when we absorb vouchers from other housing authorities. So I know Terry has spoken with you in the past about balancing kind of all of these different avenues for vouchers out of that 750 kind of pool of turnover vouchers. And the Metro HRA currently has 960 project-based vouchers awarded. It's about 13% of our total, up to 20% total vouchers in 55 separate projects through Anoka, Carver, Hennepin, Ramsey, and Washington counties. Next slide, please. So chapter 17 is our project-based voucher chapter in our administrative plan. And in chapter 17, you're going to see that we have some clarifying language and some recommended changes that's available for comment. Our public hearing is scheduled for August 16th for our administrative plan changes. The proposed revisions in this chapter are intended to kind of add some clarity to what was general Metro HRA process and offering and awarding project-based vouchers. So the Metro HRA is just kind of clarifying that we cannot offer and award PBVs every year. It really depends on how many on funding availability. As you may recall, in 2019, we opened our waitlist, our HCD waitlist, in partnership with St. Paul Public Housing and Minneapolis Public Housing. We randomly selected 2,000 families by lottery, and we had over 17,000 families who had applied. And we have about 1,900 still left on our wait list. So we haven't been able to touch our wait list nearly as much as we had wanted to. We are also trying to work through balancing the administrative burden of portability. And Terry's talked with you about this before, that every time a family who kind of the voucher belongs with another housing authority comes to our area or our service area, there are billing components to that. Kind of our sweet spot that we like to stay around is 500 port ins and 500 port outs that we are doing billing for. And right now we're at about 800 port ins and about 500 port outs. It's wonderful because that means families are able to are having access to and choice in where they place their vouchers, but it's a big number to do billing for our staff. We work with our local PHAs to see if we can do swaps. So we might say to Minneapolis, you've got 50 of ours, we've got 50 of yours, let's just change hands. And we work to do that as often as we can, also as a strategy for these portability vouchers. But kind of a recurring theme is it just remains to be an incredible balancing act. Another important notable, I guess, a piece to consider when we're balancing these project-based vouchers is once we reach 20%, this no longer becomes a tool for spreading affordability throughout our region. So right now we're at about 13%, and we also want to be mindful to keep that if we max out to 20% in the near or short term, we no longer can offer project-based vouchers at all. So kind of balancing that as well. Next slide, please. So to dip into the offer and award criteria, Metro HRA, the practice is that we are not going to take any action on PBV requests from developers until MHFA has made its funding award. So we're gonna have an RFP at the same time as MHFA, but we're gonna wait, we're gonna see what happens with financing because the project has to be determined to be financially feasible in order for Metro HRA to offer or to award it some project-based vouchers. Projects must be financially feasible for us to consider them, or the developer would need to reapply for project-based vouchers when offered again in the future. Next slide, please. Metro HRA's operating area, like you know, is Anoka, Carver, Anoka and Carver counties, and then suburban Hennepin, and Ramsey counties, excluding Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, Plymouth, Richfield, and St. Louis Park. And then one of our award criteria or kind of our considerations is going to be prioritizing those projects within our service area. This is to ensure that we're meeting kind of the needs of our region and spreading out kind of the love. We have lots of project-based vouchers are a hot commodity. A lot of developers, and it's a really important tool when thinking about affordable housing throughout our region. Metro HRA, currently there's about, if of eligible families, income eligible families in Metro HRA's jurisdiction, only about 12% of those families actually have access to some type of affordable housing tenant-based voucher. And so keeping that in mind, that is, it's not the lowest in our region, but it's certainly not the highest. And so making sure that we have housing or developments in our jurisdiction. Next slide, please. The next steps would be that the 2022 PHA plan is currently posted online and open for public comment. On August 16th, 2021, I will be back again for a public hearing. And then we will return again in Metro HRA or in September 21 for Metro HRA's approval and final recommendations for the PHA plan. Next slide, please. And with that, of course, I will take any questions and open to discussion, feedback, kind of any comments that you all would like to make.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson, for your report and for your work on this. And I do have one quick question. I think I've asked this before when we've looked at our annual plan. But just to clarify, the Community Development Committee is the final approving authority, correct? This does not go to the council. Great. Thank you. Committee members, questions on that report, comments, suggestions? Ms. Paulson, and I'll recognize you in just a second, well, Councilmember Cummings, but just to extend on that, do you then, Ms. Paulson, do outreach to the non-CD committee members so that they're aware this is happening, or is that something that's in our sort of standard operating?
You know, I don't, it's in standard operating. I think it's actually a wonderful idea, and I would think that is probably something that should be a part of. I don't know how historically in 2020 we didn't do very many revisions just because it was COVID, and so I'm not sure historically how much outreach we've done. When we've done our really, really big changes, we roll out, we do a lot of resident engagement, and we did do resident engagement as a part of the PHA plan. Every year we meet with our resident advisory board and participate in landlord focus groups. But I will take note of that because I think that would be important, especially as we think about broader changes to engage, how much engagement that we have with community council members outside of the CDC committee.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson. And I have in queue Councilmembers Cummings and Councilmember Vento. Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if you can remind us, this has been, especially the PBVs, has been the object of a lot of discussion and a lot of work by CDC and staff and so forth. How do we publicize the public hearing scheduled for August 16th so that I would imagine that there will be lots of comments from interested parties. So what's our outreach on that?
So we worked with our communications department this year to make sure that it's posted just to regular communications. I know that Metro HR has it available on our website, but we went through the kind of the standard operating procedure with General Metropolitan Council Communications as well this year. So we worked with Michelle Fury, and she gave us some kind of information as to how we should get that posted.
Councilmember Cummings, yeah, please.
Quick follow-up. Thank you. Do we do anything to make sure that those who have expressed an interest and been in touch and so forth are aware that the public hearing will be held so that, I think one of the points that was made, whether it was accurate or not, was I didn't know or we didn't hear. And I'm just wondering if we can make sure that we do as much outreach as possible, especially to those who have expressed an interest and been part of this conversation, to make sure that they feel that they do have their voice being heard and recognized and taking into consideration. Maybe we can do a little bit more than just our regular channels. Just a question.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. I think that's an excellent point. This is, like the project-based vouchers haven't always been such a hot topic. And so I think it's a wonderful suggestion. And so I will certainly make note of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Ms. Paulson. And I have in queue now Councilmembers Vento, Johnson, and then Lee. Councilmember and Lindstrom. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm interested in how we can engage with those we're working to serve, the people who need assistance with housing. And given the current dynamics with the eviction uncertainty and the growing angst about homelessness, and particularly the not so far away months of December, January, February, March, how do we get a pulse for where those residents are at and what their needs are, what will best meet their needs, and not doing it for them, but with them? How do we do that, Stephanie? I sometimes worry that well, there are times when I really don't feel like I have a good sense of what their desire is in terms of how we go forward. We hear from developers, and rightfully so, but I want to hear from the people we're hoping to help house.
Thank you, Councilmember Vento. I think that is what continues to be our mission too, is balancing great community partnerships, but also the families and households that we're serving. So we do a handful of things, and this is a very, very interesting time because the eviction moratorium is coming to an end, and Minnesota kind of is HUD is very interested, housing authorities are very interested in kind of what is going to happen as a result of this. So in response to the eviction moratorium, we are going to start tracking any time that we are receiving, even if it's an eviction notice, right? Not even that there's been a kind of writ of recovery, but just even receiving that someone is wanting to file. Because number one, what we want to know is, should we be working? We are continuously trying to kind of engage landlords and chat with families, but are we missing something in already established relationships that we need to be doing better engagement? Because the first time we hear about it shouldn't be just when someone has filed. We want to hear about it before, lease violations, and having open dialogue. So absolutely. We also have an outreach coordinator posted right now, and I think I talked about the mobility demonstration program, but we've been having really intentional conversations about what capacity that particular person will have with regards to this eviction moratorium ending. So how much of this person's new kind of workday will be completely devoted to working as an advocate for the families that we serve, and helping to kind of navigate those conversations with landlords and legal aid, and making sure that our families kind of are eyes wide open to what's happening, and that it is really, really confusing, this eviction moratorium ending, and legal aid has already given us fair warning that they are swamped. And so it's kind of our job not to give legal advice, because we are certainly no legal experts, but to help connect families with the right resources. As a part of the PHA plan, every year and throughout the year, we meet with a resident advisory board. So it's a group of households who currently are receiving housing choice voucher assistance. And one of the questions we actually asked this year was, we wanted to know, what do you help us make the decision? Project-based vouchers, they're so important. They are a 30% affordable housing tool in our region. Tenant-based vouchers, also important. Help us navigate that. And what they kept coming back to is that we sit on the wait list for so long. We sit on the wait list, and it's just kind of like a dead stop. And so the fact that we opened in 2019, and now we're at 2021, August 2021, and we haven't moved much on our wait list, is definitely something that we're mindful of. There's no perfect system. Project-based vouchers are critically important, and they're a great tool for stabilization, but so is kind of balancing that choice in where families can live and want to live, because project-based vouchers are only good in the location that they're at. So if we project-based a development, and offer project-based vouchers in, let's say Coon Rapids, I'm making up a city, right? If families don't want to live in Coon Rapids and they want a little bit of choice, that it is that they don't get that when we offer their project-based vouchers, and it kind of is a tool for almost skipping the wait list, right? Because you move into a project-based voucher unit, and then after 1 year you can request a tenant-based voucher. So if we have vouchers available, those families in project-based units are prioritized to receive a housing choice voucher. And so the families on that housing choice voucher wait list just continue to wait. And so it's just really, really tricky to make sure that those families get access to our assistance as well. It's a great question, Councilmember Vento.
Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up. Thank you, Stephanie. I just want to say thank you to you and Terry and the entire HRA team. I really appreciate the work that you do, and I want to thank the partners that we have. I woke up this morning listening to a story on public radio about the eviction issue, and the old elementary school teacher in me, my heart started to break, because I started thinking about how it's August 2nd and how, teachers and kids and families are excited about the start of the school year. But this year is going to be another troubling school year given the COVID challenges. And then for the families, not sure where they're going to be living and where they're going to land and what that'll mean in terms of where their children go to school, and also for young adults, whether they're going to college or working to finish high school, starting a career. The angst of housing is real, and I just thank you for all that you do. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council Member. I have in queue Council Members Johnson, Lee, Lindstrom, and Wolf. Council Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this information. Other than just our normal posting of our CDC agendas and, whoever may be watching, what our agendas are every other week, did we push out any of this information for tonight's presentation to any of the stakeholders that have a key interest in project-based vouchers or tenant-based vouchers? I mean, I don't know how many viewers we have on the line right now. I don't imagine there's anyone in queue or has asked to speak, but I think, let me just stop and see what we've done to let people know on a proactive way about this item even coming tonight to CDC.
Sure. Thank you for your question, Councilmember Johnson. Information item is not super standard for us to come with an information item, so it was mostly just to ground this conversation in the Community Development Committee. So we did not reach out to any developer in particular to tell them that we were presenting at the information item. I've written down here engagement and outreach to developers who have expressed interest in the project-based vouchers, and so we certainly will do that and can even schedule some time and offer our presentation as available to them, any developers who are interested. And we'll certainly do that, but no, we did not reach out to any developers in preparation of this, just because it was more as kind of grounding conversation as we lead up to our public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you just give me some leeway, I have a few things. So a follow up to that, I really appreciate that, Stephanie. But that is really what created the problem the last time we had an information meeting at the CDC. Then, of course, there were projects on the line that had already fallen off because they hadn't gotten their funding by the December 31st deadline of 2020. So I can tell you, and we all know, that there's a lot of interest in this. So I appreciate that there will be a hearing in 2 weeks on this. But again, that doesn't give people a whole ton of time when it's busy for everybody who's working in housing right now, and we are also at vacation time. So I like people to get as much notice of something coming up that they have a lot vested in, a lot of concerns about. So I wish we would have reached out more on this, because we all know there's a list of people that we should be getting this out to as soon as possible so that they can get up to speed and share it within their own organizations. I guess I'd also like to better understand the changes that we're promoting here, and within that I just need to understand again the part of the presentation that was saying right now 12% I think of people are being served within our service area with project-based vouchers, or if we hit 20%, that's the max we can go, because then I think something contrary to our mission starts to happen. Can somebody just tell me what that meant again?
Sure. So the 20% is the percentage of vouchers that we're allowed to project-based on a whole. That's what HUD allows. The 12% is saying that in Metro HRA's service area, 12% of income eligible households are actually receiving some type of tenant-based assistance. And so what we're saying is it's not that other housing or other developers outside of the jurisdiction would never be awarded project-based vouchers. What it is a priority would be given to families or to developments within Metro HRA's jurisdiction. And then any of the jurisdictions or any of the areas that had less families served as income eligible. So let me give you an example. Dakota County, 14% of households in Dakota County are receiving some type of tenant-based assistance. That is higher than Metro HRA's, which is at 12%, which means that we would want to serve areas that have less access than Metro HRA. If the households who are income eligible already is higher, the percentages to access and higher and affordable housing is higher, then we would not prioritize those. But for example, Richfield has 8.4% of income eligible households that are receiving some type of tenant-based assistance. So if a development came forth in Richfield, we would say, well, only 8% of income eligible households in Richfield have access to these affordable housing. So we need to make sure that we're mindful of that gap as well. So it's just kind of another tool to help us kind of metrically evaluate to make sure that the project-based, the high need and high commodity project-based vouchers are spread throughout. Another example would be like St. Louis Park. About 7% of income eligible households have access to these tenant-based vouchers or project-based voucher assistance. And so keeping in mind, if we're at 12%, where are the other areas at?
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, just to follow up on that. So Richfield, St. Louis Park, and Dakota County all have their own HRAs or CDAs. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
And as a percent of population, does that get factored in?
This percentage is a HUD tool. So that's what helps
Yep.
it's called the HUD Area Media Family Income Tool. And so that is what helps to develop fair market rents. So this isn't something that we've developed internally. This is something that is a federal guide.
Okay, yeah, and that wasn't my question, but I think
Oh,
it's
sorry.
answered it. No, I was just trying to understand when we look at the need overall. I just are the people that are in need as a percentage of the entire population of that area. I can get into it later with you guys. I just want clarity. I think you answered it though, so we're good. And so, you know, I just really do appreciate this. You know, and how many people, can you remind me again, are we at on the wait list?
We've served about 100. So we started at 2,000 and we're down to 1,900.
Okay. And we all know, you know, that these project-based vouchers or tenant-based vouchers are great, but you know, even with the additional ones we got, and they're good because they're targeting certain populations that are really high risk right now, given everything we're going through. But until we figure out this market problem that we have, and until we figure out, you know, how to raise incomes, and until we figure out, you know, that everybody has to be a player in this, it is, I use this term pushing rope uphill, and it's important work, but it can be very discouraging. And so we're eating around the edges of this you know, problem sandwich that we've got, but it's going to take an awful lot for us to get there. I also want to know, in the presentation you mentioned, based on the conversation about working with people in need that Councilmember Vento raised. So I presume we get some stats, and we've got people working on those notifications of when filings are starting to happen, or like you said, maybe even ahead of that. So there are programs right now that have gotten some pretty decent grant funding. I'm sure Councilmember Cummings knows, like Family Housing Fund is all over this right now. They've got project pilot work that's happened in Ramsey County to help get people out of the court system and get them out of you know, the eviction pathway. But I'm just, you know, when we talk about meeting people where they're at, I mean, hopefully we're working with those partners everywhere. And I know we are, who are hand in glove with these families, and putting our assets where we can best do that. So, I mean, I'm really thrilled that we're working on this. I still struggle with the idea that, you know, if we do too many projects that we can't get people off the list. I think that there should be a both and. I think we should be able to both build projects and both get people off of our list and not skip the list. It seems counterproductive to me that we have two separate systems that can't work together, because as we continue to lose ground in affordable housing, and we are, and the gap is even worse for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, even as disaggregated, you know, some are worse off than others. The goal here is to increase the number of units or landlords that will take the vouchers or build communities that will forever supply affordable housing. So I understand the lofty goals that we have, that we've got this list, but until we can really build more units and keep more units that are affordable within our region, you know, we're just moving the deck chairs on the Titanic. I hate to say, you know, that's a horrible way to say it, but I apologize for that, but that's how it feels to me. So I'm on the edge of how do we continue to get landlords, you know, owners that will stick with us and go the long haul and add units. That's why we can't get people off the list. There aren't enough places for them to land. And when we talk about, oh, somebody might not want to live, in your example of Coon Rapids, well, let me tell you, as somebody who has been through some serious housing insecurity in her life and on welfare, you know what? I'd have been happy to have a house anywhere. I had a baby. I didn't, there were times where I wasn't sure if I was going to have enough rent. So, while some of us might go, where do we want to live? And we have that, wonderful ability to make those choices. And we do want everyone to have those choices. I mean, for me to know that I'd have a place to go that would be solid with me forever would be a one up for me. So I'm a little concerned, but I appreciate it because I know our intentions are good. The team is awesome. You're doing wonderful work. But I really do want to hear back from everybody who's building these projects that need the project-based vouchers to help push the rest of the funding together that they need to cobble together to build the projects. We're essential to those, puzzles and those formulas to get this done. We're essential to get local matches. So, I guess there, there's no easy solution in this, but I just want to make sure that we're really keeping our eye on the ball and where the need is. And for me, the need is to get permanent places that will get people off the 7,000 list. That's that however many we had originally signed up. I think it was actually 19,000. We're a little under 2,000 waiting. The goal for me is to put money so we can build these units, and then we'll figure out, how we can move everybody around to their best place where they want to live and go to school and work and all of that. So sorry, I'm a little whipped up about it because for me, we're bringing up something that, a lot of people have a stake in, and I don't know if 2 weeks is going to really give it. And I also, I really do appreciate, Mr. Chair, your calling out the fact that, I think council should be aware of this as a whole because this impacts all of our districts, and to kind of come at this after the fact, maybe like we did a little bit the last go round, is not good. So I would even like to see this hit a council agenda. It seems a little backwards, but a council agenda where it shows up. The council can discuss it, whether it's at a council of the whole, and then it comes back to CDC for final approval. Because to me, that's a better public process and is daylighted a lot better than a 2-week notice and hoping we reach out to people, so that they can come back here in 2 weeks and probably be as concerned as they were not that long ago when they showed up on the last go round. So again, I'm saying this with much gratitude towards staff. You guys are heroes of mine. But I think the public process in this is a little bit backwards, and it concerns me.
Thank you for sharing, council member. Great. And I will commit Councilmember Johnson to following up with staff and with the chair about just how we could communicate more broadly with the rest of the council. Further discussion on this report, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is on slide number 10. The bullet number 2 says that there is no guarantee the PHA will offer PVVs each year. And so my question is, at what point is that decision made, or when will we know that? And then I also just want to make a comment to thank Councilmember Johnson for sharing her lived experience. As policymakers, so often we make important decisions for a lot of people who don't sit at the table with us, who directly are impacted by this. And it's important to remember that some of us at the table actually come from the lived experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And Ms. Paulson, a response to Councilmember Lee's question?
Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties muting and unmuting there for a second. So you heard a whole bunch of beeps. Sorry about that. So yes, you are correct. Slide number 10 says that we won't offer them, and it will take into account voucher utilization, voucher turnover rates, kind of finance and budgeting, and it will kind of come up like Congress appropriations and things like that, and balancing PVVs and waitlist admissions. I've definitely written down a lot of really notables, and that I think that we should probably be coming back to you all more often when we're making decisions about project-based vouchers. It would be helpful with engaging you all and engaging the community, and even as we think about engaging a broader council when we're making these decisions about whether or not we would offer PBVs annually. So I will most certainly, our RFP will always be in line with MHFA's, and when they kind of do their financing. But I thank you, Councilmember Lee. I think that we certainly need to be coming more often if we're starting to see that our voucher utilization is going to impact our ability to offer project-based vouchers, or we're hearing from Congress that we're getting concerns about funding allocations, that we could come have these conversations months and months before we're making final decisions about this is kind of what we're seeing, this is the writing on the wall, and this may be a skip year, or this is the writing on the wall, and this seems like a year we're going to be able to do X, Y, or Z. So thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Paulson. And I'll recognize Councilmembers Lindstrom and Wolf in just a moment, but just to put a slightly finer point on your response to Councilmember Lee's questions, it's us, right? In our annual approval of, or in our approval of the annual plan that makes that determination. We're the authority that make it as a council, or is it a staff-driven decision?
So the PHA or the administrative plan is only going to say that we have the authority to allow or not allow. It's never going to say the number of like
Okay.
vouchers we would award each year. That would be something that we would come to you all and have conversations with you all about. So it's not going to be written really anywhere. It's just going to be something that we talk about with you all.
Okay, thank you. And I think just lift up a couple of points from Councilmember Johnson's comments. That's where some of the confusion came in, I think. Last year is exactly that, maybe lack of clarity. And also I think to Councilmember Lee's point and Councilmember Johnson, it's really that dynamic tension, right, between project-based and tenant-based. And so I'm glad we're having this early conversation, and the more I feel like we can sunlight this conversation, the better for the partners and certainly the people that we're trying to serve. So,
Mr. Chair, this is Terry Smith.
Yeah,
I wonder if
yeah.
I can respond. I was not sure if you could see my hand. May
I
I
could not. Thank you.
add to
Please.
that? Council members and Mr. Chair, thank you for this important conversation. I think just a couple of clarifying points. The PHA plan and public notice has been posted since July 6th on the public notice period, but well taken that we are able to reach out to the development community. And I know they are well aware of this because there's been a campaign going around for many, many weeks. So they're aware that this is coming before the committee and the opportunity for public hearing. So I think that's important to point out. But then to Stephanie's point, there isn't a housing authority in the country that explicitly states in their administrative plan, we're going to offer 20 vouchers every January 2nd through eternity, because there are too many things that impact that decision. And, you know, historically for 20 years, we've made that decision at a staff level. So the council member sets the overall direction, allowing discretion to project base up to 20%. But now that this is getting so much more public attention, I think it makes sense that we come to you prior to making that decision, you know, after the first of the year, when we know sort of what our budget's going to be, when we know sort of what our voucher utilization is, to help make that decision at a policymaker level. And then just the third thing I will say is, you know, we ask the development community if they want us to offer an award project-based vouchers. Every single one of them is going to say, yes, 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 we want it and we want more. The people that are on the waiting list are going to say, no, 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 we want our name to come up on the list so we have a unit. So I just want to just be very clear, and the people that we're hearing from are the people that are in positions of power. And that's the development community. And so the people that are on the waiting list are the people that don't have the power. And we're going to try to get some of those to see if they're willing to talk at the public hearing. But I think it's a power dynamic that's important to point out. The people we're hearing from are the people in positions of power. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Appreciate the
Chair,
clarification.
Mayor, to that point, please, Mr. Chair, briefly.
Yeah, Councilmember Johnson. Yeah, there's other council members that have been in queue, but I would like to comment on that as well. So I think we'll get there. Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Councilmember Lindstrom.
And I think Councilmember Wolf is on the list too and has to leave in a couple minutes. So I'll defer to Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you. I must have missed that. I apologize. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to understand more about, I mean, if we could get a link or a PDF or whatever of that map of the utilization in different communities, that would be a helpful piece of information to have. But I would also like to understand if the other agencies within the metro are also offering project-based vouchers, because it kind of feels like everybody's coming to us and saying, we need it from you. And I want to understand the other agencies, because it shouldn't be our job to supply the entire region with project-based vouchers.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ms.
Thank you,
Paulson?
Councilmember Wolf. I will certainly get you the information about the different the different percentages that I shared with you off of slide number 12. I would also mention that other housing authorities do. So Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minneapolis just had a project-based voucher RFP open, but it really depends. It's because it just really depends on the size of the housing authority, because we are all using that same pot of vouchers, those housing choice vouchers, to allocate project-based vouchers. So I think your point is very true, Councilmember Wolf, is how do we continue to balance this? Because we are the largest housing authority in the state. People are going to look to us to project-based vouchers, but how do we prioritize that with the wait list, with the region that we serve? It's kind of all of these moving parts in order to find the sweet spot. But you are correct. Because we're the largest, that we have the largest pool of turnover vouchers, and so we have the largest possibility to project-based, generally speaking.
Mr. Chair, follow-up, please?
Please. Yep, please.
If we can get the percentage of project-based vouchers from that each of the other housing agencies has available, that would be nice to have. How many they've already committed out of their pool of vouchers. If it's not too much work. I know you guys have plenty of work, but if
no, I don't mind at all.
Information that you have.
I can get that for you, Councilmember Wolf, so I will get both of that information to all of the CDC.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councilmember Wolf, and thanks, Councilmember Lindstrom, for deferring. And I would just add to what Councilmember Wolf said. I bet it would be really interesting information to have, interesting data to consider. And because of the size of our PHA, the influence that we may have, but also the relationships that you have, Stephanie or Terry, or your incredible teams. My guess is, and I'll now inquire with some of my friends who are in local government in those other PHAs. I'm guessing they're having the same debate in their PHAs between tenant-based and project-based as well. So it would be it seems to be a different kind of conversation now than maybe it was when we were first appointed. And so it'd be kind of good to kind of know the regional vibe.
Certainly.
Thank you. So Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Stephanie, one of the recommendations is that we will take no action on PBB requests until MHFA has made their funding awards. And if I recall correctly, that is how we historically have done it. That's correct. So, and we changed that last year. What part of that change didn't work, or what's making staff recommend going back to the way we used to do it?
So we have historically, thank you, Councilmember Lindstrom, we want projects to be financially feasible before we start committing and kind of putting these project-based vouchers on a shelf, right? And saying they're untouchable because we have to make sure that we have some available for a project. Last year was the first time that we kind of did this separate RFP that you remember Terry talking with you about. And basically all of the language that a lot of the language around this award and offer criteria, and I can pull up the exact slide. Like for example, on slide 10 was our guiding process already, but we just want to make sure that we're adding clarity and that developers and participants and families understand that, oh, thank you, Greg. It was number 10, is like we've always internally, kind of as how Terry was mentioning, we've made staff decisions internally about whether or not we're going to offer and award PBVs. But the actual explicit call out in our administrative plan that there is no guarantee we'll offer them every year has never existed before. And so this added language is just to provide clarity to things that we were doing at a staff kind of level prior. But because I think as Terry and even Chair Lilligren have talked, and project-based vouchers are becoming more and more of a hot commodity, and that PHAs everywhere are kind of having this internal discussion about how to balance the needs of the regions, is the more clarity in kind of understanding that everybody has in the decisions that used to be internal and are now going to be external and forward facing. So everybody knows what's going on, and there really isn't any cause for kind of confusion or feeling like there was misinformation or that we missed something, because that's certainly not our intent. It's for anyone to feel that that they didn't have the information that they needed.
Councilmember Lindstrom, any further questions?
So my memory is a little shaky on this. So last year we changed it so that we awarded developers project-based vouchers going into the Housing Finance Agency process, and they said, hey, if we got these vouchers in hand, if we go into the process in hand with vouchers, then we're going to have way more success in getting the financing. But now we're saying, now we're just going back to the way we did it a couple years ago.
Terry, did you want to say something? You look like you came on camera.
Yeah, I was, thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Lindstrom. We still have that as an option, so our PHA plan still keeps that as an option. So our administrative plan says we will offer and award project-based vouchers in two ways. Number one, through the Minnesota Housing RFP, as we have historically done, or through an RFP that we issue ourselves in advance of Minnesota Housing's RFP. But under both scenarios, we will wait until Minnesota Housing makes their funding award before we decide to award or not award the project-based vouchers to a given project. So we still will consider offering in advance of that. And frankly, I think it worked fine. There are some things that we would want to tweak, but I think that worked well. Developers seem to be happy with that, because then they could go into Minnesota Housing's RFP process with the PBV award, and then they were contingent. They'll still be contingent offers. And if a developer is successful in getting their financing, then we'll do what we did last year and award, or for 2020, and formally award the PBVs.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry, for the explanation. So now I will go back to Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Terry, I really appreciate this. I think the hard part that I struggle with is why in the world, with smart people on this planet solving all kinds of crazy things going on, and I don't mean this at the HRA level, I just mean, why is it that the wait list has to be in competition, with the project-based vouchers? And I do hear you, Terry, when you talk about the people in power. I understand that, because they've got the ability to show up, right, in power and in mass, but they're really representing people who need that housing. That's where their hearts are at. So I mean, I want to be thoughtful in the way we describe that, because they're only showing up because they're trying to maybe get 40 units full of the people that we are all serving. So their intentions are wonderful. And the only other thing I would say, Terry, yes, you're right. And I think it's important is all those vouchers, whether, pre or post, they're all contingent upon the financing, right? The feasibility of the project moving forward. So I can even appreciate that. My only question is there any way, Terry, given the lead time in these projects and given the runways that they need and all the hoops, and we know that if they go into Minnesota Housing, they likely won't go get in on the first round, right? It takes 2, maybe even 3 times at a bite at the apple to get there. But they're also using these advanced tentative or conditional vouchers to go to other units of government and get funding, which is really important to, again, fill the pipeline of the funding stream so that the gaps aren't there. So is there any way, that we can, as soon as possible, let people know what's going on year by year, so they're not caught scrambling, or God, they missed the deadline by 3 months, or, It's just another one of those tight deadlines with multiple jurisdictions. It just seems so freaking hard to complete. And like I said, when I started doing this 20 years ago as a public official, we just termed it, you know, these projects are on life support because you got one funding piece lined up and thank God. And then you realize the next one's coming up in 60 days. And then that one falls to the wayside. You didn't have enough time to turn it around. Whatever we can do, and I know Terry, you're such an expert on this, to just keep those people that are in the development sector out there working on this to the best of our ability in the know so that it can be timed as well as possible. That's all I'm saying, because I'm really discouraged. I mean, one of the cities, Plymouth, in my community, was moving forward and trying to get, you know, affordable housing subsidies in it, and it fell off. We lost it. I mean, it took a lot of political will, it took a lot of organizing, it took a lot of years, and it didn't happen. And partly because it wasn't 30% affordability, it was only at, I think, the 50 or 60%, which is workforce housing. So you know, I'm going to repeat this and repeat this for all the people who out there, and it's not us, right? But all the people out there who think communities aren't doing their part. They don't want affordable housing. Well, yes, there are communities that are greatly doing their part, but the projects aren't all seeing it them, you know, get to the finish line because of all these gaps in funding. And I would only say this, that's why people are so desperate for anything that they can get, whether they're the tenant or whether they're the developer or whether they're anybody in between. So I appreciate the struggle, Terry, that you have. I mean, you're really, you know, trying to figure out what is near impossible. So just know my heart's in the right place, and whatever we can do, even in the process, even when we can't do vouchers for projects in a year, the sooner we can tell people, the better, in my humble opinion.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I have a couple of things. One, but I want to start with a question, please, for either Stephanie or Terry. And if I remember correctly, and not unlike Councilmember Lindstrom, you know, sometimes the memory gets a little hazy. But the changes that we made last round, we made because we felt we could have more influence with the new procedure over where these funds went. Correct. So it was something we were trying to sort of strengthen our muscle a little or something. And so I think that's something that this council likes. And so now we're kind of dealing with the consequences, and that's just fine. Okay, thank you. So the thing, and I don't need a huge explanation right now, but as we go through this, because my guess is we'll continue having this conversation throughout our term and into the future if we're so fortunate, is that Terry, I totally get this idea that, you know, we get contacted by the people with power, by the people with access, you know. My guess is not a lot of nonprofit housing developers would consider themselves very that powerful within the system, but you're right, they're the people who know how the system works and they get access to us. They can organize very well as advocates and things. And I totally buy the argument that people on the list are the ones who don't that kind of privilege and that kind of access. And when we learn that we've only served 1,000 people off of our list, it doesn't feel like we're really, for me, it doesn't feel like we're really serving that population and those people. And so there is a little bit of a dynamic or a disconnect just in the way as a, you know, at a policy level that I see that. I get the argument, but it feels like we're not actually doing that. And that's not a question or anything. That's just a part of the conversation. I mean, if you have a response, great, but as we go forward, I'm going to be striving to better understand how we're actually better serving people on the list when we have numbers like that. And the other thing I would say is I get it. Lists are complicated and dynamic things, housing lists, HUD lists. You know, I was interim CEO at a project-based um, housing development, and I learned a lot just on the ground about how dynamic those lists. It's not as simple as go to the next person, go to the next person. There are lots of considerations and dynamics contributing to how lists function.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, and I appreciate those comments. And, you know, our comments and our discussion isn't just, you know, we recognize these projects are incredibly important and serve some of our region's most vulnerable people. They're all really good projects. And we wish we had, you know, it's a resource issue, just like everything else. There's not enough affordable housing, and we wish we could do it all, and we can't. And so we appreciate the conversation of trying to obtain that balance with just balancing our resources to do so much more than we have. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Smith and Ms. Wilson. And I hope you're hearing the support from this committee. We're not being critical. We get it. We're in the middle of a system that's very complicated, and we're trying to do our best. And I'll just second what Councilmember Johnson said. I think you and your team are just stellar, and we're very fortunate. Very fortunate to have you. And I was going to bring this up earlier when Councilmember Bento was talking, and she specifically referenced the homeless population, unsheltered folks. And I don't know how many people caught the article in the New York Times today about clearing camps in New York, in Manhattan. And if you took out New York and put Twin Cities metro area in the article, you would think they were talking about our systems and how they're designed with good intent, but they're not necessarily serving people in the way that they could best be served. So again, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I look forward to more of it. Any other comments, questions from committee members on this? Director Barajas, Ms. Smith, Ms. Paulson, any final words?
Council members, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to offer, again, in Stephanie's staff report, you can see a link to the proposed language changes that she reviewed today. So we certainly encourage you to take a look at that. And if you have any other thoughts, we'd love to have those. Obviously, we have the public hearing coming up, but that doesn't mean we can't make changes to language or add additional things before our adoption of the administration plan. I totally appreciate all of your comments today, too. We totally understand the difficulty, as Terry and Steph have stressed, of having to balance everything. And I'd also like to remind you of some of the things that you have done, which is increase the amount of money in our local housing incentives account. That's one of the things where we can help push affordable housing as well. And then I also wanted to just give you a little preview at an upcoming committee of the whole. Our staff will be presenting an update on affordable housing production and overall development in the region as well, so we can get a bigger kind of picture update on where things are at. So we know that despite COVID work over COVID impacts, and we know that there's been an increase in cost of housing and construction of housing. But one thing that we continue to see, not in affordable housing, but in overall development, is continued apartment construction. It's kind of just kept on roaring ahead at pace. So while it's not affordable per se in a subsidized format, it is additional stock. But our staff will give you much better information than what I just provided as a bit of a preview today. So look for those things coming up. And and I also just wanted to note that we will continue to explore additional projects that are consistent with your housing priority direction as well. Strategies and projects that help move different elements of the overall landscape forward. And we'll be bringing those forward for further discussion later this year. So while PVVs are really important, they are just one of the tools in our toolbox in the overall affordable housing scheme.
Great. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Anything else from committee members, staff? Okay, seeing no business before this committee, we're adjourned.
Good meeting,
Have a
Mr.
great
Chair.
evening, everyone. Yeah, no, thanks for your participation.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Have a
Bye-bye.
good week.
See you, Michelle.